This is the Baunfire Gaming Podcast, episode 369. Nice. I am your host, Morgan, aka Bon Diesel, and this week we'll be talking about Xbox's 2026 next generation console delays, Anthem's final days, and much more. Be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app, leave a review on Spotify or iTunes, and subscribe to the Bon Diesel YouTube channel to get all of my videos, including this podcast. Gaming news, let's get into it. It was a bit of a slow week, so don't be surprised if this one's a fairly short one to start off the year. Welcome to 2026. In the gaming and non-gaming news sectors, it's a bit of a hot mess right now. And I think this year is going to be really interesting. I think we're going to see lots of movement when it comes to how consoles are priced. I think we're about to see, as much as Xbox took the brunt of the bad news when it came to raising prices on their consoles, where an Xbox Series X is like 600 or 650 now, when I paid 500 for my day one Series X 5 years ago. It's crazy, almost 6 years ago. I suspect we're about to see everything go up. I think the Switch 2 is going up, PlayStation 5, 5 Pro, everything's about to get crazy expensive because you can't eat RAM being as expensive as it is right now, and then the GPU side of things too, and all the components that have to do with that comes down the line. So, maybe PlayStation, maybe Switch, we know Xbox doesn't, maybe they all have stored consoles that were made before at cheaper prices, and they can continue selling at their current prices, which are already raised in general. But any Switch 2s, any PlayStations, any Xboxes that are being made in the last, month or moving forward are going to be more expensive to make. Therefore, they will cost more to buy. There is a possibility that maybe hardware contracts and production contracts and stuff, maybe that holds down the price for a bit, but once those contracts are up, it doesn't matter. So it's going to be an interesting year to see how all that plays out. I think it's going to be interesting to see how studios and game devs react to this, because it probably means that the idea of the next gen of consoles and stuff, which we'll talk about, they're probably not coming sooner than later at this point. So slow week, but still some stuff to talk about. Let's get into it. Okay, we're starting off with Xbox's 2026 could be huge. We've seen Xbox hyping this up a lot, as well as others in the industry. As much as a punching bag as Xbox is, for better or worse, or deserved or not, they actually on paper seem to be doing pretty well as a company. There's a lot of like echo chamber talk and a lot of like blinders on people who talk about video games, and whether it's journalists or content creators or influencers, or even just hyper connected fans that are on social media and arguing about this stuff all the time, where I think people get stuck in this idea of like console sales equal goodness of product, and in that measure, the Switch was one of the best things ever made. The PlayStation 5 is kicking butt. We're looking at probably 80, probably 90 million plus units at this point. And, we don't know the numbers, but it's likely Xbox is down around 35 to 40 million units sold. I believe the number was last year, or in 2025, they sold around 2 million units. That's actually more than I would have expected, if I have to be honest. They've made essentially zero push to sell more hardware for like 2 or 3 years at this point. And 2 or 3 years ago, we were under the impression, I think they'd sold like 20, 25, 30 million consoles. If they sold 2 million last year, and you can kind of extrapolate a little bit, I suspect they'll settle in around like a 40 or 45 million unit number by the end of this generation. Not bad, but not as good as the competition. That's all anyone cares about. I think if you look at them isolated, they've done extremely well, despite, a decent amount of of rake stepping, right? Of unforced errors here and there. Even though when I see people talk about that, I would still argue that the majority of topics that people would say, like, oh yeah, Xbox really squandered this or messed up here, like so many of those topics are things that they had nothing to do with. They just existed, and there were rumors or whatever else happened. But you can only control the narrative so much. At the end of the day, Xbox seems to just be pushing on with their strategy, whether it's working or not. To this day, but we'll get into more of the conversation here. But on my rant here, I'm not one that sits here and goes like, "Oh, Phil Spencer killed Xbox," or Sarah Bond or Matt Booty or whatever. I will say, just in a more meta perspective, Satya Nadella, who's the CEO, the head of Microsoft, seems to be doing and has done what will likely be irreparable damage to all of Microsoft's brands by, I'm sure, on the sheets, I'm sure on the paper, in the accountant department, the shareholders, I'm sure they're ecstatic with him. But when it comes to someone who actually kind of likes Windows and uses Office all the time and uses Outlook all the time and likes Xbox and wants to keep liking Xbox, it really seems like the directives and the goals of the company under this leadership has been awful. Like it seems like it comes from them. Like when people dunk on Xbox and stuff, fine, it's deserved to a point. But I still see a company, a division that's trying to do their best in the situation they're in, and trying to be agile and willing to try things that that maybe they wouldn't have 10 or 15 years ago, and that's what they're doing, for better or worse. And I feel like if the things they were doing were happening under less pressure, it would be more believable that that's really what they think is best. But it seems like there's so much pressure from above, from Microsoft executives to hit whatever marks they're supposed to hit, that they're making these really pretty drastic changes in their strategy, and everything. And it just seems like maybe there's a misunderstanding or a lack of investment from the top, but we'll move beyond. 2026 though should be a pretty good year for Xbox when it comes to the big titles they have releasing. A new Fable game, which hasn't happened in a really long time, especially not like a legit Fable game. Gears of War E-Day, a prequel to the original Gears of War, which I suspect is going to be insane. Forza Horizon 6 should be really exciting. The Halo campaign Evolved, I'm a little like, I'll play it. It's an interesting concept. Even as someone who's pretty okay with the multi-platform moves that Xbox has been making, I'm definitely a proponent of delayed multi-platform releases. I don't think they should do day one on anything, but they're obviously doing that with some games. The campaign Evolved, it's going to be strange seeing people playing that on the PlayStation. That's all I'm going to say. There's also a bunch of games that aren't part of that like tentpole, kind of area. You've got games like State of Decay 3 that could easily come out in 2026. Clockwork Revolution, which is really just a neat looking game. It hadn't really sold me until the most recent showcase, when the gameplay they showed with like time manipulation and all that actually looked really, really cool. Game Pass is almost certainly going to have a good year this year. They while it's insanely expensive, I'm lucky enough to be, have a few years of it paid off already at cheaper prices. It's pricey. I still think if you play games often, which is who Game Pass is for, I still think it works. I still think you can justify it if you're playing 2 to 3 games a month on it. It definitely pays for itself still. If you're someone who plays like 2 games a year, you shouldn't have Game Pass anyways, even if it was cheaper. It doesn't make any sense, unless it was like super, super cheap, which it's not. It hasn't been for a while. So on the software side of things, should be eating pretty good. On the hardware side of things, it's really going to be it's going to be interesting. We're going to get some kind of showcase soon. They do the developer direct stuff every year, and this being their 25th anniversary, I suspect every event they do is going to be ratcheted up to a point. I wouldn't be surprised if a like final announcement here in the next month or so that they do with this dev direct. I wouldn't be surprised at all if it includes a hardware announcement of some kind. The next console, we'll talk about the next gen consoles in general in the next story, but the next one for them is going to be interesting because all the rumors, all the thoughts around it are that it's not just going to be a traditional console, that it's going to be more than that. And it's also going to come at a time where they've sold, one of their lesser amounts of consoles compared to the competition ever, right? So are they going to continue pushing into the idea of, hey, we'll provide hardware, but it's just an option. You can play games wherever you want, but here's our option. If you want to play it on ours, I suspect it'll be pretty good. Or are they going to try and make a push and be like, hey, we have the fastest hardware. It's coming out years before our competition. This is the best place to play Grand Theft Auto 6 and to play, some of these other games. We'll have to wait and see. I mean, I'm someone who's almost certainly going to buy whatever the next gen console is. I have a nice PC and I still play 90% of my games on Xbox. It's for my setup. It makes more sense personally, especially when I stream and do things like that. It's just easier. I essentially use it as a second PC, and it works well that way. I play games on my PC. They're just, more like real-time strategies and games that I just prefer to play on mouse and keyboard. But if my Xbox plays something well, that's probably where I'm playing it. And that's not just out of like console warrior loyalty or something. It still plays things really well. It's just my preferred place to be. So I think 2026 will be pretty big for Xbox. Unfortunately, we're destined to have every month, whenever the outlets and the content creators numbers are dropping a little bit, they'll be, throwing out their clickbait articles. And when layoffs almost certainly happen, they'll, do the Chicken Little dance once again. And we'll deal with that. And it just kind of is what it is. It's expected at this point. But it would be pretty cool if, maybe at some point, some of these places would be willing to give some, maybe some good press to the brand. Instead of just constantly doomerizing everything. I will throw in a funny note. One of the Digital Foundry people, commentators, made this like completely like, no one asked for it post of being like, looking back at our videos this year, it sure seems like Xbox might not even be worth covering for us. And it's like, y'all, you put out videos like 2 weeks after games come out sometimes. And maybe that's part of the fault of the game devs and the publishers and stuff. But it's like the kind of content they make, I have a feeling that not much of that kind of content gets many clicks in the first place. Their highest rated releases last year were things like the Steam Machine preview and things like that. Like, it's not like they were getting huge numbers off of any coverage directly game console related, but you gotta play into the narrative. I understand, and we'll move on. Speaking of next generation consoles, there's a lot of debate going on right now and a lot of conversations happening about the next Xbox, PlayStation 6. Trying to stifle a yawn there, sorry. I don't know, no one knows, right? The current hardware situation only seems like it's going to get worse. RAM, which is really important for PCs and consoles, has like 3 or 4 times in price over the last few months. We have these rumors that GPUs are going to jump in price, like potentially double in price in the next year from AMD and NVIDIA. That's going to affect the next gen consoles. That is going to make them more expensive. We don't even have a price for the Steam Machine yet, because it's gonna be like $1,500. Like, I've still occasionally seen people being like, oh, PlayStation and Xbox better be scared of the Steam Machine. It's like, my man, that thing is going to be like $1,500. Like, the PlayStation 5, Xbox are going to be downright affordable compared to the Steam Machine, more than likely. Obviously there's differences in functionality and stuff. I get that, but still. So Insider Gaming did a big article about this. I understand these outlets aren't just always going to give away their sources and stuff like that, but Insider Gaming just seems to just make stuff up so much. And we know Tom Henderson, who runs that website, I've seen him say and post that, they get so much of their info from like, basically like QA people they've paid off who are breaking NDAs. And I feel like the information from them is so unreliable, and they take such a shotgun approach to stuff of just like throwing out a bunch of stuff and hoping a few of the things hit, and then hoping everyone forgets about the things you were just straight up wrong about. And this article they had, where it was like saying that they believe that both PlayStation and Xbox are likely delaying plans to be releasing new hardware until that hardware becomes cheaper to make. We're already in a situation where I think that like 2 terabyte special edition Xbox is like $750. It's like the same price as a PS5 Pro, which is kind of funny, even though the PS5 Pro isn't that much faster than the Series X, because the Series X was already faster than the PlayStation 5 by like a marginal amount, which only makes the PS5 Pro a marginal amount faster than the Series X, but no one really cares about that stuff. These current gen consoles are already insane. If the plan is to release a next gen console in the next 2 or 3 years, like, I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know how that works, because things just aren't affordable right now. So, these rumors could be true. The thing about the Insider Gaming article is that it's literally the vaguest stuff. Like, it's hard for me to take seriously a story or an article where someone's like, sources tell me, and then the things they say are the most like, yeah, like anyone could just make that up. Maybe you do have a source, but still the information you're putting out there is so common sense and so obvious that it's just like, yeah, I guess that could happen. And then if it doesn't, you guys will just pretend like you never said it. Like, I don't know. I think it's pointless. I think Insider Gaming tends to be kind of useless, but who knows? I just, the Sony especially, but even Microsoft, Xbox, they can throw their weight around a little bit to get better contract pricing and things like that on hardware, but not enough. I mean, the simple fact is, like, even with AMD, they're so deep into the AI stuff as well. We already knew that NVIDIA was, but they're so deep into it that, they see the gaming and the consumer side of things as such a small part of their market at this point. They're, AMD is definitely chasing that NVIDIA money, and NVIDIA is, even though it's pretty obviously a huge bubble, they're riding that bubble hard right now. And they're like this insanely, wealthy company with wealthy people running it. I don't know how it gets better. The only thing I can see changing it is, some kind of AI, bust happening at some point, where all of these investments end up being pretty clearly a waste of money. They're going to find uses for AI, just like, kind of like how microtransactions were a big thing for a long time. And, studios and platforms and publishers are jamming it into everything. Then there was enough pushback and things kind of calmed down, and they kind of found a rhythm that people were willing to tolerate. I think that's where we're going to be at with AI in the next, 4 to 5 years. But until that happens, I worry that things are just going to get worse as hardware gets shorter and harder to find and more focused on, that rather than consumers. So we'll have to wait and see. Ubisoft got hacked. If you didn't see the stories, basically Rainbow Six Siege got hacked. It seems like the worst, where players are getting randomly banned and things like that. They gave away billions of dollars of currency, of in-game currency, to, like, it seems like all players, which obviously screwed up the marketplace. I assume they've rolled that back and taken care of it. There was an immediate concern that maybe this was a way bigger, hack and leak than they originally thought. There were claims that they had, game files and plans for the long-term future of Ubisoft titles and all that. Since then, that's been rolled back a lot, and it seems like a lot of the people involved have kind of been like, "Oh, okay, just kidding." They, we didn't really have much, or straight up, I've seen commentary supposedly from Ubisoft sources of being like, they didn't really get much beyond what you've already seen, which was the Rainbow Six stuff. So who knows? Ubisoft is in a weird spot. I feel like they're this gigantic company that puts out like one game a year, which isn't sustainable. And there's claims of a new Ghost Recon game. There's hopes for a new Division game, the Division 3. They also have like a big DLC or spinoff or whatever with Survivors coming relatively soon, I assume. They continue supporting Division 2. And then they obviously, you have to assume they have a Far Cry game in the works. You have to assume, they have a few of their other kind of tentpole. We know they have more Assassin's Creeds and stuff. So, if this really would have been a big leak that exposed all of that and showed everyone what's going on currently, might be a big deal. As far as I can tell, that was mostly BS. So I don't hate Ubisoft the way other people do. I'm wishing them the best, especially Ubisoft Massive, who makes The Division and made Outlaws and the Avatar game, which are both great games, even if they're a bit underrated, at least in my opinion. But yeah, this hack, it's never good. I'm sure they've had to drop millions and millions of dollars trying to fix, just Siege on its own and hopefully nothing else. But if you got to enjoy being a billionaire and Siege for a minute, I am very happy for you. There's a possible PS5 jailbreak, speaking of hacking, method that has likely been created. So there is this, it's like the Star Wars pod racing game or something. So hackers figured out with the PS5 that if you get this physical version of this game, for whatever reason, there's some kind of issue or there's something going on with it where it allows you to like break the protections on the PS5, and in theory would allow you to be able to play pirated games on your PS5, where typically it prevents you from being able to do that. So one of the big signs of how this happened is that the prices for the physical version of this game that people are using to do this went from like $2 on eBay to like 500 plus, because there's probably only so many of those physical copies even in the world at this point. I think it's a PS4 game, if not earlier. And it just so happens that, it can be used for this nefarious purpose, and everyone's trying to scoop them up so they can do that. So, in your, not great, but also kind of amusing news for the week, if you want to hack your PS5, you better start looking for some old physical Star Wars games on eBay. We have a possible Witcher 3 DLC. Yes, Witcher 3, not 4, which isn't out yet, and they're working on it. Witcher 3 that came out like a decade ago, if not more at this point. Supposedly there is a DLC being made. I don't think anyone said it yet. I suspect this is being made by a co-dev. They use co-developers and I think they still are, for Cyberpunk, so that they can move on and work on their newer projects. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if this is a co-dev situation. But what it appears to be is a DLC that's going to bridge from Witcher 3, where you play as Geralt. This DLC will potentially put you in control of Ciri, who's going to be the protagonist of the new game of Witcher 4. So that's cool. Like, if you're a Witcher 3 fan, then holy crap, you couldn't be more excited about getting DLC like a decade after the game came out. I, for one, kind of don't care. Witcher 3 is a game that for years people hyped up to me. It was on sale. I finally bought it. I started playing it, and I don't get it. I suspect you had to be there. I suspect maybe you have to be more into these like high fantasy RPG type games. I'm definitely more of like a sci-fi kind of space, type of guy, or at least a more realistic aesthetic or modern aesthetic. So this just never really clicked for me. I've tried to start up Witcher 3 like 4 or 5 times, even relatively recently. It just doesn't click. Probably the worst hot take I have is that I can't stand Geralt's voice. It's so forced, in my opinion. I can't listen to him without like giggling. It just sounds dumb to me, but that's a me problem, not a you problem. Regardless, if you're excited or you like The Witcher 3, you're excited to play more of it, even if it's as a different character, it seems like that is very likely coming. Anthem servers are shutting down on January 12th here in, just over a week. Anthem is BioWare's attempt at the live service looter shooter genre, a game that I remember playing. I want to say a pre-alpha build of it because I'm an EA playtester sometimes, and I remember even in like the testing phases playing, that pre-alpha, beta, all that, being like, oh, I don't think this game has the juice. Being a big Division fan and being knowledgeable on Destiny, even if I don't really like Destiny that much, I could tell what they were trying to do, and it felt pretty quickly like, oh no, this isn't gonna work. And then the game came out, and that became very true. Now, there were lots of things happening at BioWare that kind of led to that as well. Mark Dara, who used to be a kind of a production level person there, has made their own point that they wish that Anthem would have been delayed and they would have been allowed to make Dragon Age 4 first. Which Dragon Age 4 eventually kind of became the Veilguard many, many years later. Kind of, sort of, not really, but that's a different video. Regardless, this is a bummer. You don't like to see games get shut down, because when those servers shut down, unless someone finds some way to hack it into private servers, Anthem's gone. And for all of its faults, and it has many of them, there are still people who really like playing Anthem, and really at least saw the potential in it, and still like to play some of that potential here and there. It's just, these things happen. I, for one, am like definitely one of the people who's worried about games like The Division, because like they are so server dependent. There's, in my opinion, basically zero chance they could ever migrate the services that the servers provide for a game like The Division to your hardware. It's just too much when it comes to AI behavior and all that. And so there's gonna be a day where like you won't be able to play Division anymore, right? Which is weird for me, and that's the situation that they're in here with Anthem. It sucks. But at the end of the day, maybe it's a good thing for BioWare to kind of brush off their shoulder and move on, because they seem to have their own problems. Sean Layden, former PlayStation executive and real bad take giver, says there should be one architecture for games shared across all platforms that would make it easier to release on all of them. This is a rare W by Sean Layden. It seems like he is typically a really terrible and dumb and outdated hot take machine. This one kind of makes sense because the impression I'm under, and so if there's any developers in the crowd or listening who want to correct me, so like Xbox and PC uses DirectX. That is an architecture or a framework, I guess, for video games to work on those platforms. I'm under the impression that in one way or the other, Nintendo and PlayStation have their own architecture. So they may not necessarily have DirectX, at least not the same as Xbox or PC has. So that means when a game is developed, say for PlayStation 5, and then they want to port it to other platforms, it means that they then have to go from using that, scaffolding to using another publisher's scaffolding to release their game and make sure it works on their hardware and all that. And that makes things difficult. It's part of why some games take so long to become multi-platform, because they just get the game out. They just barely finish it in time for release. They release on, say, one platform, say PlayStation 5, and then they want to put it on Switch 2 or Xbox. It takes time and it takes money. And sometimes that doesn't always happen. So this is a rare W for Sean, I think. I would argue that Xbox and Microsoft's DirectX would make the most sense. It's the most widely known and used, and really shouldn't be that hard to implement on non-familiar, platforms and hardware. But it's not going to happen. They're never going. PlayStation and Nintendo are never going to use DirectX, or at least not use the exact same thing as Xbox to make things easier. They should, they won't. And that's just the way that goes, I guess. And then wrapping it up here, Stranger Things season 5 and finale, the video game-ish related. I like Stranger Things a lot. I especially love the first 2 seasons. 3rd season, a little rough. 4th season, really great. And then the 5th season comes out. And I think overall, it's like a 6 or 7 out of 10 season as a whole. There was a lot of filler. It was pretty short, which was is a weird combination. But the characters are there. Sure, they're all 10 years older than when they started this, even though they're only supposed to be a few years older. So it is like hilarious to see like Millie Bobby Brown. She looks a lot different than she did when this show started, even though she's only supposed to be a handful of years older. And that's fine. They do their best, I think. I actually think the conclusion and the way they ended the finale was actually pretty good. There's plenty of things to complain about, but I will say at the end of the day, I'm glad Stranger Things exists. I think if you go back and watch it from beginning to end, you'll appreciate that. Yeah, maybe they didn't exactly stick the landing, but it's still pretty good. And if you can appreciate the entire journey, I definitely have my issues with Stranger Things. I don't think it's spoilers, but the main villain, I just found like he just looked hilarious to me. And he was supposed to be this like menacing, scary, gross individual. And to me, he just looked kind of funny. So I struggled with some things involved like that. But for the most part, it's a whimsical, fun story. And they did a good job telling it. And I hope that all of those young actors can go on to do nothing or do whatever they want, because they all deserve it. It was cool seeing them grow. And then finally, I'm going to wrap it up with my most anticipated games for 2026, at least that we know about. I have Grand Theft Auto 6. I actually didn't even like 5, but I'm definitely feeling the vibe of 6 a lot more. So I'm excited for that, even though I think it gets delayed to 27. That's a different video. Fable, I'm not even that big of a Fable person. I think I played the second one pretty extensively. But I'm just curious to see, my sensibilities have changed a lot with the games I like, and I suspect I'll be a fan of Fable one way or the other. Mixtape is this, just for the soundtrack. I'm excited about this indie game. Replaced, again, this is one of those games that's been anticipated for like 4 or 5 years. I am a little worried that it's going to end up not being nearly as cool as people hoped it would be when it first got shown like 4 or 5 years ago. But I'm still curious about it coming out. And again, another game that I don't really love, Gears of War. With E-Day, I am excited. I think it's gonna be cool seeing them tell that story of the before times, before the swarm came and literally ruined everything for them. So I'm curious to see how that game plays out. I'm so excited to see the Coalition get to make an Unreal Engine 5 game, just for the Series X and S, obviously for other consoles too, I assume at some point. But they haven't had a chance really to go all in on being like, okay, here's this big, beautiful spectacle. We're now setting the standard for Unreal Engine 5 on this current gen and probably next gen as well. So Gears of War E-Day, I'm definitely curious about that. Let me know what games you are excited about down in the comments. As for some content updates, nothing big. I am going to do Extra Life again this year. I haven't done it in like 3 or 4 years. That is a fundraising campaign that happens every year. The money goes to the Children's Miracle Network. And specifically for me, I'm raising some for my local children's hospital. They buy them games and basically find things for these kids that are in for like cancer treatment and these like long-term care situations, letting them play video games or do video game related stuff. So you can find the link for that in my link tree at the bottom of the video description. If you're looking at the YouTube video, I'll figure out a way to get it into the podcast. But the best place to find it is probably on my social media channels, or to look in my link tree link, which is linktr.ee/bondiesel. I'm looking to raise $1,000 to start. I hope to get more than that, but that's going to be where we'll start the goal. I'm going to add some goals and prizes, and as we hit $100 or $500 or whatever, I'll try to throw some stuff in at either giveaways or some special streams or whatever. Maybe I can get people to make me play games I don't like or something as a punishment or an incentive. I don't know. But I really like this. I've really been looking for a reason to stream. If I have to be honest, I like the games I'm playing, but I don't always want to hit the button and stream them. I think having this as kind of a motivation will help me, or at least I hope it will. So maybe we can come back to this at the end of the year, and I can be like, oh yeah, it didn't help at all. I didn't stream barely. I don't know what's going to happen, but I will try. That is the goal. Other than that, the podcasts are going to keep rolling. We'll see. I might do a Mass Effect Hypecast sooner than later. there's just not much to go over. But I do think there is value in talking about the games industry as a whole and what that may mean for the next Mass Effect and for BioWare, because it matters. The things that are happening matter a lot. So we'll see how that plays out. So check out the podcast, check out the YouTube videos, obviously this podcast and my other one, the Mass Effect Hypecast, and we'll keep doing the thing. And that is where we will wrap this one up. Thank you for listening to this episode, and thank you to everyone who supports as YouTube members or Twitch subscribers. If you're interested in supporting this podcast and all of my other content, please check out the links in the show description. If you have any questions or feedback, hit me up on social media at Baundiesel or at the Baunfire. Join my Discord via the Linktree link down in the episode description, or comment on Spotify or YouTube. Yes, on Spotify, you can comment for some reason. I don't know why. Almost no one does it. So if you do it, I will see it and I'll try to respond. And then YouTube as well. I'll definitely respond on there. And follow and subscribe on all those places so you see all that stuff. That is all I have for this episode of the Baunfire Gaming Podcast. So until next time.